Elizabeth Olten's laughter once echoed through Maple Creek, and Mara Sutherland was the quiet neighbor who would silence it forever. In a town where everyone trusted each other, their friendship seemed innocent, almost pure. But beneath Mara's calm smile hid a fascination with darkness so deep it would shatter two families, destroy a community's peace, and expose the horrifying truth that evil can grow in the most ordinary places. Maple Creek was the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. It sat quietly between endless fields of golden corn, where neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles and everyone trusted one another. The evenings were filled with the sound of children laughing and bicycle tires rolling over gravel driveways. But in late October, a silence fell over the town that no one would ever forget. In the middle of this peaceful community lived the Olten family, caring, close-knit, and ordinary in every sense. Their youngest child, Elizabeth Olten, was 9 years old, cheerful, and innocent. The kind of girl who loved collecting stickers and making birthday cards for her friends. Her laughter echoed through the house, filling every corner with life. Her family adored her. She had no enemies, no secrets. Nothing that would ever suggest danger could find her. Just a few houses away lived the Sutherlands. They were quiet people who kept to themselves, polite but distant. Their daughter, Mara Sutherland, was 15, a girl who seemed lost in her own world. Teachers described her as intelligent, but withdrawn. The kind of student who barely spoke in class, but handed in perfect assignments. Behind her calm expression, though, something was different about Mara. Her parents noticed her spending hours alone in her room, sketching dark images and writing strange notes, but they dismissed it as teenage imagination. Nobody could have guessed how deep her thoughts had grown, or how far she was willing to go to satisfy them. On that crisp October evening, the sun was slipping behind the trees, casting long orange shadows across Maple Creek. Elizabeth had just finished her homework and was eager to play before bedtime. She told her mother she was going to visit Mara for a little while. It was a short walk through a narrow stretch of woods that separated the two homes, a path Elizabeth had taken countless times before. She grabbed her pink flashlight, the one she used whenever it got dark, and ran out the door. Her mother expected her to be back in less than an hour, but as the night deepened, Elizabeth's mother began to worry. The kitchen clock ticked louder with each passing minute. By the time the porch light flickered on, fear had crept into every thought. She called Mara's house, but there was no answer. She stepped outside and shouted Elizabeth's name, her voice echoing across the silent fields. Neighbors soon joined in, flashlights in hand, calling through the woods. The police arrived quickly, marking the beginning of a desperate search that would soon consume the town. No one wanted to believe that something terrible had happened in their safe, familiar neighborhood. Yet as officers scoured every corner of Maple Creek and search parties fanned out across the woods, an uneasy chill lingered in the air. Somewhere between those trees, beyond the reach of their flashlights, something unthinkable had already taken place. A darkness hidden beneath the surface of a town that had always seemed peaceful to break. The search for Elizabeth stretched deep into the night, and by dawn, the once quiet streets of Maple Creek were filled with police cars, volunteers, and news crews. The Olten family stood by helplessly as officers organized search teams, combing through the thick woods and nearby fields. The air was heavy with dread. Every few minutes, someone would emerge from the forest shaking their head, empty-handed, their flashlight beams cutting through the fog. It had been less than 24 hours, but to Elizabeth's mother, it already felt like a lifetime. Detective Calvin Hurst, a calm yet determined investigator with years of experience in missing person cases, led the search. He knew the first 48 hours were critical, and he worked tirelessly, mapping out every possible route Elizabeth could have taken. But nothing made sense. There were no signs of struggle, no discarded belongings, and no witnesses who had seen or heard anything unusual. It was as if the little girl had simply vanished into thin air. Neighbors were questioned one by one, and among them was Mara Sutherland. She appeared composed when the officers arrived. Her voice was steady as she explained that Elizabeth had stopped by but left soon after to go home. She even offered to help in the search, walking among the volunteers with an expression that was unreadable. Detective Hurst noticed her quietness, her detachment from the chaos around her. Most people in the town were in tears or trembling with fear, but Mara stood still, almost observing rather than participating. It struck him as strange, but with no proof, there was little he could do. Days passed, and the town grew restless. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed a stranger had taken Elizabeth. Others whispered that she might have run away, but none of it fit her personality. Elizabeth was not the kind of child to wander off or trust someone she didn't know. The pressure on the investigators intensified. Helicopters circled above, search dogs sniffed every inch of the forest, and divers were even brought to nearby creeks. Still, the only thing they found was silence. 1 week later, a breakthrough came. Early in the morning, cadaver dogs began reacting to a certain spot in the woods near the Sutherland property. Their barks shattered the quiet air, drawing everyone's attention. Officers gathered quickly, marking the area with yellow tape as they began to dig. The ground was soft, recently disturbed, and within moments, the nightmare that everyone had tried to deny became real. Wrapped in a torn blanket lay the small body of Elizabeth Olten, buried under layers of damp soil. Her pink flashlight, faintly glowing beside her, was the only thing still alive in that grave. The discovery stunned the entire town. People wept openly, clutching each other as the officers carefully carried the body away. Elizabeth's family collapsed in grief, unable to believe that their daughter, who had only gone a few houses away, had been found lifeless in the woods they once trusted. But for Detective Hurst, one thought echoed louder than all the tears. Whoever had done this hadn't come from outside Maple Creek. The killer had been here all along, living among them, hiding behind an ordinary face. The morning after Elizabeth's body was found, Maple Creek was cloaked in a deep, suffocating silence. Police cars lined the Sutherland home, their flashing lights reflecting off the pale siding of the house. News vans parked on the streets, and neighbors stood behind police tape in disbelief. No one wanted to admit it, but a terrible suspicion was beginning to take shape. The spot where Elizabeth had been found was only a few hundred feet from Mara Sutherland's backyard. That single fact changed everything. Detective Calvin Hurst led a team into the Sutherland home, searching for anything that might connect Mara to the crime. Her parents, Angela and Mark, stood by in shock, insisting their daughter could never do such a thing. But as officers moved through Mara's bedroom, the truth began to unravel piece by piece. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight, and the walls covered with sketches that sent chills down the investigators' spines. There were drawings of small figures surrounded by trees, faces without eyes, and one that looked disturbingly like Elizabeth, a little girl with a flashlight in her hand. Standing in a forest, on her desk lay several notebooks, filled with messy handwriting and dark thoughts. One entry described her desire to feel what it's like to watch life disappear. Another page listed methods of hiding evidence and burying a body. The writing was cold, precise, and emotionless. It was clear that this wasn't the fantasy of a confused teenager. It was the confession of someone who had been planning for weeks. Forensic teams collected dirt samples from Mara's shoes, and when they matched the soil from the burial site, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Investigators also discovered a small shovel behind the Sutherland shed, with traces of Elizabeth's DNA on it. The evidence was undeniable. Detective Hurst ordered Mara's immediate arrest. When officers approached her, she didn't resist. Her face was calm, almost blank, as if she already knew this moment would come. She didn't cry, didn't ask questions, didn't even look at her parents as she was handcuffed and led into the police car. It was that calmness, that lack of any trace of remorse, that shook the officers to their core. At the station, during questioning, Mara showed no fear. She spoke slowly, describing what had happened with chilling detail. She admitted luring Elizabeth into the woods, ending her life, and burying her body with calculated precision. When asked why, she gave no clear reason, only saying she wanted to know what it felt like. Her words left the entire investigation team speechless. News of her confession spread across the country. The small town that once represented safety and innocence was now synonymous with horror. The Sutherland family's world crumbled overnight. Their daughter had not only committed a terrible crime, but had done it without guilt or explanation. And as the truth reached the public, Maple Creek realized that the real danger had never come from strangers. It had come from within their own community, from the quiet girl next door. The days following Mara Sutherland's confession were filled with unbearable grief and disbelief. Maple Creek was no longer the peaceful town it once was. Every corner seemed haunted by the tragedy that had unfolded. The Olten family retreated into silence, their home once filled with laughter now wrapped in sorrow. Elizabeth's bedroom remained untouched, her drawings on the wall, her school bag on the chair, and her favorite flashlight lying on her desk. Her mother couldn't bring herself to move anything, as if keeping those things in place could somehow keep her daughter close. Across town, the Sutherlands lived in a nightmare of their own. Reporters surrounded their home, demanding answers, while angry neighbors whispered that they had raised a monster. Angela Sutherland barely left her bed, her eyes swollen from crying. She replayed every moment of her daughter's life in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed, the late-night scribbling, the long hours Mara spent alone, the moment she caught her daughter staring into nothing. Mark Sutherland tried to remain strong, but he, too, was broken. The weight of their daughter's crime crushed them, and guilt followed them like a shadow. Detective Calvin Hurst met with the Sutherlands again to piece together what could have led Mara down such a dark path. They described her as a quiet, intelligent child who had changed over the years, more withdrawn, more detached, and drawn to things that disturbed others. Angela admitted that Mara had once written a story in school about a girl who never came home, but the teacher had dismissed it as creative fiction. Now it seemed like a warning no one had understood. Investigators revealed more disturbing details. Mara had not acted impulsively. She had planned everything. She had chosen Elizabeth because she was small, trusting, and easy to lure away. She had tested different spots in the woods days before the crime, looking for one hidden enough that no one would notice fresh soil. Every step was deliberate. It wasn't a moment of rage. It was cold curiosity, an experiment in control and destruction. The Sutherlands sat in silence as they listened to the detectives. Angela broke down, repeating that her daughter couldn't have done it. But the evidence was too strong to deny. The reality was unbearable. The person they had loved and protected had committed an unthinkable act. Their family name, once respected in Maple Creek, was now a symbol of fear and disgust. The community turned inward. Parents no longer let their children walk alone, and friendships that had lasted decades began to crumble under suspicion and paranoia. Churches filled every Sunday as people prayed for peace, yet forgiveness seemed impossible. For the Olten family, every sunrise was a reminder of what they had lost. For the Sutherlands, every night was a punishment of its own, knowing that their daughter's darkness had taken an innocent life and shattered to families forever. The town, too, would never be the same again. The courtroom was silent when Mara Sutherland entered, her wrists bound in cuffs, her expression unreadable. The once shy, quiet teenager now stood before the world as the confessed killer of a child. Rows of people filled the gallery, journalists, neighbors, and families who still couldn't believe what had happened in their small town. At the front sat the Olten family, their faces pale, drained from months of grief. Across the aisle, Angela and Mark Sutherland sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the floor. Between the two families hung an invisible wall of heartbreak and disbelief. The trial became the most talked about case in the state. Every detail was dissected, every motive questioned. The prosecution described Mara as manipulative and emotionally detached, a girl who had meticulously planned Elizabeth's death, out of a desire to experience control over life and death. They read from her journal, displaying the chilling entries she had written in the weeks before the crime. Her fantasies about power, her cold observations about fear, her desire to feel something real. Each word felt like a blade cutting through the hearts of everyone present. When the photographs of the crime scene were shown, sobs filled the courtroom. Elizabeth's pink flashlight, the disturbed earth, the blanket, every image served as a painful reminder of innocence lost. Mara showed no emotion. Her face remained still, her eyes blank, as though she were observing someone else's life. The psychologists called to testify described her as having a dangerous fascination with death, an inability to empathize, and an obsession with control. None of it made her actions easier to understand. For the Olten family, each day of the trial was torture. They listened as every gruesome detail was revealed, as strangers analyzed their daughter's final moments, and as the girl who had once been part of their neighborhood became a symbol of evil. Elizabeth's mother couldn't bear to look at Mara, yet she couldn't look away either. She wanted to see some trace of guilt, some flicker of humanity, but there was nothing. When it was time for sentencing, the courtroom was so quiet that even the hum of the air conditioner could be heard. The judge's words echoed through the room. Mara Sutherland would serve life in prison. There would be no possibility of parole. The decision brought no joy, only a hollow sense of justice. Angela collapsed in tears, her husband holding her as reporters swarmed outside. The Olten family sat still, their eyes fixed on the girl who had destroyed their world. Years passed, but Maple Creek never healed. The woods where Elizabeth was found remain untouched, a silent graveyard of memories. A small white cross stands there, surrounded by flowers that the Olten family brings every October. They leave her flashlight, still pink and bright, as a symbol of the light she carried. The Sutherlands moved away, their home abandoned, its windows dark and empty. In the end, the town learned that monsters do not always come from the outside world. Sometimes they are born among us, wearing the face of a child who once smiled just like everyone else.